Okay.
Okay, we're rolling.
Yeah, we're rolling. So,
Introduce yourself.
introduce yourself.
Hi, we're John DeLuca and Joyce DeLuca, the great grandparents of Sully Oswald. And this is back in the time of 2011. We happened to be visiting with Sully's grandmother. And we wanted to leave a little background of our lives that he can tell other people about when he's older. So let's begin.
At the beginning.
We'll start actually around the time when we first met. It was in the theater in New Orleans. Joyce was 14, I was 16. But I knew then this was the girl for me.
What year was that?
This was in the year of 1942. I had already graduated from high school. Joyce was a sophomore at Annunciation High School.
And this is in New Orleans.
In New Orleans, right. And the theater that we met at was called the Famous Theater. And of course now it's more famous. And then, what happened, to make really this part of it more brief, I followed her home one night, managed to wiggle her phone number from a friend, called her up, tried to get a date. She was too young. Her father was a policeman at the time, and quite a big policeman, over 6'5", about 280 pounds, really a big pussycat kid. And she said her father wouldn't let her date, and I felt that I had enough persuasion that he would gradually see things my way and see what a wonderful guy I was that his daughter could date.
Yes.
So did you know that he was chasing after you?
Yes, he followed me home.
And what were your first impressions of this crazy
I
guy following you home?
I thought he was a very good-looking guy,
Oh.
but I knew I never did go out before. My mother and father wouldn't let me,
Mm-hmm.
go on a date. But he continued coming, following me.
Well, even then, I believed persistence pays off. And I still do today. So, eventually, we did have a date. It had to be early in those days. Our dates were like afternoon dates, and the time for her to be home was like 8:30 p.m.
I think it was 5:30.
in the beginning. Yeah.
So what kind of things did you guys do on your dates?
We would go to, there was an amusement park
Yes.
called Pontchartrain Beach in New Orleans, which had all kinds of rides. Of course, it was right on the lake, on Lake Pontchartrain, and they had swimming. At that time, the waters in the lake were good for swimming. They may not be that way today. So you could go swimming, enjoy the rides, and have hot dogs and drinks. And it wasn't really expensive because really everything was relevant in those days.
How much did a hot dog cost back then?
Hot dog cost 10 cents.
Well,
Okay, yeah. And you could get a drink for a nickel almost. Yeah. But
How did you get there?
we'd get there on public transportation. There was they called it a train, and it was more like a trolley that ran all the way out to the lakefront, which at that time was called Mandeville. Mandeville now is across that lake. So few changes have been made since then. And so those were our outings, the lakefront. We enjoyed going to movies because that's what kind of fit in with the budget I had available, which was very limited in those days.
What were some of the movies you remember? Any of the movies you saw together while you were courting?
Do you remember any movies?
No, I don't think so.
I kind of always looked for a romantic type movie because the movies were the places we could steal a few kisses.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, instead of the submarine races, because she had to be home before dark, they would go make out in the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because after the movie, when I would bring her home, her mother was always waiting and say, "Okay, John, it's time to go home." And I'd say, "One kiss, good night," you know. Well, I'd make that kiss last for quite a while.
5 minutes, right?
Wait a minute, so how long before the first kiss? How many dates?
Well, you see, my outlook in those days, if you didn't kiss on the first date, there was no second date.
I'm sure. When I was your first
That doesn't
date.
surprise me.
And so I did kiss her madly, and
Oh, very badly.
she always wanted a second one. Sometimes I had to say no because her mother was saying, "Go home, go home."
Go home, John.
So, that part was that. We, going together, I think we gradually fell in love with each other. In fact, I know we did. And of course, in those days, World War II was on, and I knew eventually that I would be going into some part of the service.
I'm sorry, just to interrupt now. Were you, everyone was being drafted. Were you planning on being drafted, or did you just know you were going to hit a certain age and you were going to volunteer?
I wanted to volunteer. I wanted to join up because I wanted to go into the Navy. I used to bum around with a few guys, and we all had the Navy on our mind.
Is there any particular reason you chose the Navy as the branch you wanted to go into?
Yes, because my friends were going into
Gotcha.
the Navy. We already had 4 or 5 of them in the Navy who were a little older in age than me, so they went earlier than I did. And I ended up getting into the Navy and going out to San Diego, California for boot camp, and was able to get lucky enough to get into radio school
Okay, all right, Ken.
and become a radio operator. And so at this time, back home, while I was in California, Joyce was still in school.
You were in high school.
I was
Still in high school, and
I was going to graduate.
going towards her graduation, and we stayed in very close contact. Our aim was to write each other every day, and sometimes that couldn't happen for one reason or another, and you had to skip a day or two. But all in all, we did. We wrote each other very often, and these were all aimed toward our future when I would be discharged. In fact, I tried to talk her mother into letting us get it engaged before I left, but she wouldn't let us do it because Joyce was still in school, and we were still very young.
How did you feel when he went off to boot camp and you knew he was going to go to the war? Because I mean, this is like what? So it's 1942 that you were.
The following year, 43.
And so that's pretty deep into it. That's a lot of things. So how were you nervous or?
Well, I was nervous, and I prayed a lot for him, and we corresponded, but I knew he was coming back, even though he was going to the Navy, into war. I always knew he was going to come back. My daddy wrote to him all the time, too. So they really...
So as a 16-year-old, though, did you get how serious this was?
Yes, we were serious.
Not in your relationship,
you mean
the war.
in the times.
In the war. I mean, we were deep into a world war. Did you,
Right.
as
Well,
a 16-year-old, Mama, did you comprehend how serious of a situation this was, that he might not come back?
Right, that's right. But then I knew that if he would come back, we had planned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't plan on being married right away.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when I graduated, I went to work for the U.S. Engineers. I was a secretary, and he said he was coming. The war ended, and he said, "Well, I'm coming home, and we want to get married. I want to get married." Excuse me. And that's what started. When he came home, we lived with Mom and Dad for a while because they had a big house. And you couldn't, so it worked out fine. He went to work at that time for the railroad, back to the railroad, yeah.
So you guys never had a doubt that it wasn't going to work out?
Not
You guys,
really,
you
no.
guys
I
knew
think,
everything was on the up and up.
at our ages, young and
Idealistic.
really for the both of us, it was our first real serious affair with the opposite sex.
Yeah.
And I did have a job. I was working for the railroad before I left, and in those days they were obligated to hold the job when you returned from the service.
Mm-hmm.
So my job was waiting for me, and I knew I could support a wife. So I kind of persisted with her father and mother that we both wanted to get married. And so her father was writing to me on a regular basis, and he agreed when I would return that we could get married. As a matter of fact, after I returned, 10 days later, we were married.
You guys didn't waste any time.
No, we didn't waste no time.
Why don't you tell us about the tattoo? The tattoo.
Okay. Before I went in the Navy, I was about 16 years old, out with a group of friends, and in those days, they had a tattoo artist who parked a little green wagon on the foot of Canal Street right by the Mississippi River, and he did tattoos. So I guess feeling maybe slightly high, we all decided we would get a tattoo, which we did. And I had the tattoo on my right arm of a heart with a banner through the middle of it saying U.S. Navy. So I really would have been in a fix if I wouldn't have been able to get in the Navy.
That was before he went
Before
to
I
the Navy.
left.
And how much did that bad boy cost you?
This tattoo at that time cost $1.
Good old days.
Good old days.
And so that was kind of the story of the tattoo. My friends all had it because we all kind of stuck together, as good friends do.
Mm-hmm.
And so then back to the time when we came home, and as I say, we were married right away, and I wanted really to start on a family right away. So I wanted Joyce to quit her job.
And I quit my big job, yes.
And for another important reason why, because there were many veterans returning who didn't have jobs. And the majority of veterans at that time were men. They had women in the service. They were mostly nurses. So we didn't have like the ratio that exists today between men and women in the military.
And when the war was over, I mean, it was millions of men coming
There
home
were
from all over
millions
the world.
involved because if I'm correct, there were like 16 million men that served in the different services in World War II from the United States. So there were many, many men returning. And so as a result, we kind of bumped in with her parents for about a year and a half. And then were able to find a small house to rent. And it was around that time, after about 2 years, that Joyce became pregnant for our first child, who y'all know today as Kinta, or Nini, as some of the nieces call her. And she was born when in our first rental house.
And where was that house?
And that house was located at 2028 Pauline Street, near Alva, in New Orleans. And we lived there for 4 years. At the time, we didn't even own a car. So when Joyce got pregnant, she had to be rushed to the hospital in a police squad car because her father picked her up.
Dad was a policeman,
Yeah.
naturally.
And so we lived in that house about 4 years, and of course my aim was to own our own home. And we were able to find a new subdivision that was being built primarily for returning veterans. And these were all prefab homes built by a company out of Baton Rouge called Crawford. He had the plot of ground for approximately 1,400 homes, with space set aside for a Catholic school and a Catholic church and a public school. Plus we had playgrounds on which to play ball. It was a very close-knit community, and the entire 14 or so hundred homes were sold out in a matter of 6 to 9 months. As a matter of fact, I was working on a railroad and was able to talk to the sales manager of this company to let me work extra and sell houses when I got off of my regular job.
One of like the 400 jobs you had.
What did you do on the railroad?
I was a per diem clerk, which on the railroad I was assessing connecting line railroads for cars that we handled in interchange. And so I worked in the yard office along with about 7 or 8 other men who had different duties in a clerical capacity. And
Which railroad line was it?
it was the L&N, which is Louisville and Nashville Railroad. And so we managed to purchase our first home.
And that, wait, let me just say, that was Gentilly Woods.
That's the development where
That's
the
the
first,
Development
subdivision.
the
was
first home you
Gentilly
owned was.
Woods, right.
Tilly Woods, right.
4927 Fresh Drive.
I was gonna say.
What's the address? 4920?
4927 Fresh Drive.
Fresh Drive.
And our first home cost us pretty dearly. It was $11,500.
Yeah.
What year was that you bought that house?
That had to be
Louis was built in,
1950 or 51.
yeah, because Louis was born in 49.
And she was about 2 years old, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So about 1951, when we bought our first home. And we lived in it for 15 years and had two more children, Pamela, who is now in the position of Sully's grandmother.
Yeah.
And
Sally.
then, of course, our son came along, and that's Jay. And that was the extent of our family, three
What
children.
year was Jay born in? What year?
What year was Jay born
Yeah.
in? 1956,
I'm 53. I
You're
was born in
53?
1953.
and Jay was born in 1956. 3 years difference
Then
between.
then we moved into another section in Chantilly Wood.
Yeah, because of Pam, who is also a persistent little thing, we were looking for a larger home, and we were going to move out of New Orleans into the suburb called Metairie. And Pam, at that time, was an active Girl Scout, and she had all her friends naturally in Chantilly Woods and attended grammar school there. So she didn't want to leave, and she came home one day from selling Girl Scout cookies, and said, "Dad, I found a home, I found a home." And I said, "Okay, where is it? We'll go look." So we went and looked, and this was still in the confines of Chantilly Woods, on a street called General Early, which had larger homes on it, and a little more secluded. It was like a horseshoe, and the people were getting ready to move out of town, so ended up making a deal to purchase their home. I was able to sell my original home on very short notice. I made a profit on it, and then paid a little more for the second home that we purchased in Chantilly Woods. And then we stayed there, lived there, another 9.5 to 10 years.
How much was the General Early house?
The General Early home cost approximately $27,000.
You should see how beautiful it was. Large ground,
Yeah,
big
and
rooms, you know.
we were, after 10 years, were able to sell it for about $44,000. And then from
People
Chantilly.
watching this years from now are gonna faint when they hear these numbers.
Yeah, that's right.
It's making me,
Yeah, because I paid
Pass
more
out.
than that for my car.
yeah, exactly.
You know?
It's the car payments.
Yeah.
Well, after we're selling the home on General Early in Chantilly Woods, Pam at that time was out of high school, right?
Yeah.
She had
Cabrini.
graduated from Cabrini High School, and Jay was still in high school. Kenta was in college, on her way to becoming a dental hygienist, which she still practices today. And we moved out into the Metairie area. We were able to find a large home there, and this house consisted of about 3,000 square feet, and it was ideal for us. They had all large rooms. Everybody had their own bedroom at that time.
How much was that one?
That house cost $68,000, and we lived there for 16 years, and I sold it for $160,000. So by that time, my home was completely paid for. Excuse me. So we were able to realize a profit on selling our homes, And I was approximately 60 years old at this time, and thinking about retirement. So our children were leaving the nest. Kinta was married, had 2 children, unfortunately was divorced after about 2 years of marriage. And Pam was in college at the time and working. She always worked a job of some type since the time she was about 17 years old. And so she kind of met Sam LaFata accidentally.
Accidentally.
Yeah. They were supposed to be doing some type of TV commercial, and I really think Sam filled it up with a few liquids that made her, not
susceptible to his charm.
A good mind. And he was filling her head with how beautiful California was compared to New Orleans, especially Southern California. And I really have to agree with him. That is so. So she decided she wanted to go to California. Her and Sam were getting serious, talking about getting married, and they decided one day to head out to California and maybe look for a place to live, and so they could get married. And they did. They found a nice apartment, and shortly after that, they were married on a mountaintop.
On a mountaintop, what?
On the side of a hill in Burbank.
In Burbank? What
Yeah.
was the name of the place?
The Castaway.
The Castaways. We had a small but lovely wedding for Pam. The family was able to come out to California from New Orleans. The LaFata family, most of them were out here already, so we were able to have the 2 families together, had a beautiful wedding, and then they decided to make their home in California. And the first place that they found a home was in Reseda, California.
Where's Reseda from here?
In the San Fernando Valley.
Where's the San Fernando Valley from
It's
here?
about 50 miles north of here.
Okay.
Northeast.
Northeast. Yeah, northeast.
Inland?
What actually happened was we were in an apartment. We rolled into town from driving from here from New Orleans.
Yeah.
Hi. We rolled into town October 1st, 1977. And Sam was adamant about wanting a house immediately. We bought and moved into our first house on Christmas Eve of 1977. And then we got married in June of 78. Had Chris, March of 79, and we moved into this house in Huntington Beach in August of 79. And now it is 2011 and we're still here with Sully Boo.
So, let's see something.
And then what about
And we had Cole Mary,
Cole Mary?
October 1985. Ooh,
So you don't turn it off.
87. 87.
Okay.
October 25th.
Cole Mary.
1987. But this is more about Mimi and Papa.
Yeah.
So
No, but
that's, I know,
that's
we
all life. It's,
Yeah.
you know.
So I got a couple other things I want to ask you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
talk about the war.
I want to, if you don't, do you want to share your experiences during the war?
Yeah.
Okay, let's.
How many battles you
I want to. I want to get a general gist of what you experienced and what it was like.
Okay.
being in the Navy
and how many
during World War
ships.
II.
Yeah, things like that. Be interesting for
How's
him.
that look?
Oh, just hold it.
Looks like I don't have a steady hand. Okay. Okay.
Okay? So, going back to the time when I was in the Navy, I was fortunate enough out of boot camp to get into radio school, and that was for a period of about 20 weeks. I graduated from radio school as a seaman first class, and went right aboard a destroyer. The destroyer was the USS Putnam DD 757, the flagship of Squadron 66. And we, that was in October of 1943. No, 1944. Correction there. October of 1944.
And so you were, what were your, like, what kind of jobs did you perform?
Okay, I was a radio operator, which consisted of, we had to learn the Morse code and theory and typing, and we would maintain 4 different circuits in the Radio Shack at all times. So while as a radioman, you had to participate in all different watches around the clock, and the watches were like midnight to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 12, and so forth around the clock. So we rotated these different watches, and there was always 5 men in a watch, because maintaining the 4 circuits, and 1 man had to do the collection and the relief. After about an hour on each circuit, you would have to relieve a different man. And it so happened, while performing one night on the mid-watch, 12 to 4, Joyce had given me a U.S. Navy insignia ring, which I wore at all times, and it was on my, I guess, my index finger. And so when I was on watch, I would take it off to type. Well, this one night, I happened to doze off during the midnight watch, and I had my ring off, and we were receiving a message that had the call sign of our ship in it, and my finger went wild, and I had nothing but S's across the whole line. A group of 5 S's and 10 groups to the line. So when the message went in to the decoding shack, the decoding officer was unable to decode the message, and we were on radio silence. They had to open up radio silence in order to get this message from another ship, since our call sign was in the heading. As a result, it prevented me from getting my rate for about 3 months.
What about the battles?
Well,
How many battles?
we participated after shakedown. I did get a leave, an 8-day leave to come home, which I hadn't been home in like 8 months. And in those days, the only transportation was on a train. It took me 3 days and 3 nights to get home. So I came home anyway. I had to see my girlfriend. And I stayed an extra day and a half and got back. I was over leave like it was the day before Christmas Eve, and there was about 20 others that were over leave. So we were restricted the rest of the time in the States, which was like 2 days, and then we headed overseas in the Pacific.
So it's totally worth it to be over leave.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah, well, tell them about the battles you were
Okay,
in.
I'm
Okay,
leading
well,
up to it.
Oh, you lead up to it, okay.
So we went on to Pearl Harbor and outfitted. As I said, we did the whole shakedown on the ship. So we
And what do you mean when you say shakedown?
all right, the shakedown, this was a new ship that had just been commissioned. So a shakedown of a ship means to get the ship ready to sail, to take all the kinks out of it.
Right.
And that's what we did. Now, the shakedown on the ship lasted from about October to December. And when I got back from leave, we knew then we were going right overseas. So which we did. We headed out overseas the day after Christmas and went right to Pearl Harbor and were preparing for the invasion of Iwo Jima, which was in the month of January of 1945. And we, again, pardon me,
Okay, good.
we were part of the Fifth Fleet, which consisted of about 200 ships of all type. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, destroyer escorts, all type of ships. It so happened that every ship in that fleet of 200, except 5, sustained damage from the enemy. We were one of the 5. So we participated in the full invasion of Iwo Jima, and after securing Iwo Jima, we went right on to Okinawa for the invasion of Okinawa.
Can you chase him out of there, honey?
The invasion of Okinawa was April 1st, 1945, D-Day. And we were at battle stations for the entire day, including cooks and bakers, so we didn't have any hot meals to eat. We had hot dogs all day on Easter Sunday.